Well, we'll go ahead and get started because most of this stuff I have already gone over with Mr. Qua in a more brief fashion. This is the last of the web sessions that we have scheduled. We have quite a few smaller programs to talk about. I have not yet received anything from anyone about anything else that we might want to go over. So if we can, we'll just kind of go through these, and if there are any questions, uh, we we can we can take a look at those questions as they come up. Um, and it is quite likely that we won't be taking up the full 2 hours because the sessions the programs that I have, like I say, are very small, and I had kind of counted on some question, set some time for some questions as well as possibly some other programs. But that's okay. Getting off a little early is going to be just fine. So the first one, and hopefully everybody has received the updated manual pages. The first one we're just going to go through real quick is called Printer ID Maintenance, and it's going to be on the manual 8B as in boy, page number 7. It's just a single sheet. And the purpose for this one is very simply to let you know that you have the ability um, to name your printers with something that would mean something to someone, um, and also give kind of a location, so that when someone goes and clicks on the printer ID box, they get a list of the printers, and they get a list of their printer ID, a description, and a location. Now these two fields are just something that you can do. You'll notice that they're currently labeled with printer number 51, for example. We'll just take that as an example. It has a name that indicates that it's CyberPrinter. It's a Jakarta printer, and J, its location is Jakarta. These are just kind of defaults. Some people will use the location to say that it's in the reception area, or it's in the main laboratory, or it's a location within the laboratory. So if somebody that isn't sure where printer 51 is sends a printer job to printer 51, they can tell exactly where it is. The little J in parentheses indicates that this cyber printer is also, or this printer is also designated as cyber printer J. And we'll talk a little bit about how the cyber printers are named in a little while. So you can put up to 40 characters in the description and up to 20 characters in the location field. And it can be anything that you want. If you have access to this screen, you can make the changes and make these things help more useful, than they already are. I think that's just about all. The cyber printers have a little bit different connotation. The cyber printers, as you can see from this screen, are physically the same printer. They're the same piece of hardware as a regular printer. So printer 51 is also cyber printer J. Now the naming of the cyber printers is managed in a different place. It's in just the one right underneath here where it says sample pipe and cyberprint maintenance. There are a number of other things that are done in this program besides maintaining the cyber printers. You also get to maintain the sample types, so stat and routine and any other special sample type. If you use the location, then the field locations are there. There are several other things. What I really wanted to focus on with this thing, and this is the very next page in the manuals, page number 8, is how the cyber printers are constructed and how they're named. Each cyber printer has a letter, it has a description, and then it also has some instant print or startup kinds of things that happen. Now, most of your printing, this has to do with what the printers were used to use when we were doing printing. Cyber printers were our automatic printer, and that was the only thing. So we would say that it's an instant printer, indicating that when you sent a job to a cyber printer, it would print instantly. And if the system ever went down, then anything that was queued up to go to that printer would print at the time it was started up. And then there is a 30-second pause that's built in, which is quite long. So sometimes if you print to a printer, you would see that. Now, in this case, the description says Jakarta J. Something that you may want to consider is to make this say 51, so that when you double-click on a cyber printer field, you can see Jakarta, and it's also 51. I'm not going to make any changes. I'll leave that to you, but that's just an option. So, for example, when we go to inquiry and we pick a sample, I have a sample. I had a sample. Let's do this. Caps lock. All right, I bet you that's live environment. All right, we'll just find somebody here real quick. Come on, here we go. And we select print, and we want to print to a cyber printer, and we hit cyber printer and we double click on the field. Then what shows up in the selection field is the description of the printer that we had set up in the other program. And so that's what we see. So if this said 51, we would know that it's also 51. It's just kind of helpful. Or this could also say main lab, or Jakarta office, or Jakarta front desk, or something. There is fewer characters available for this description in the CyberPrint field, but that's where that all comes into play. And that's pretty much all I wanted to go over here, was that when you're naming your printers and calling the descriptions, that you do have some control over what the names are and how they appear in the help windows, which makes it easier for the people who maybe aren't as familiar with the printers to identify where they're going to send a print job to. It's not really that important in the small places where you may only have one or two printers, but in the larger places, Hong Kong has two in the main lab. It's kind of helpful to see multiple printers with the names. So those are the two things that I have. We're going to jump around a little bit. I wanted to show this printer. I think that one of the things that this next job, or this next program, is called Turnaround Time Report. Now there are a couple turnaround time reports, and I'll get to the other ones in a little while. These turnaround time reports are part of the application, and they're built into the application. And I wanted to go through a little bit of how that they are available, and what you can do and what you can. Now, these are probably of more interest to the marketing people than maybe the day-to-day laboratory folks, but you'll be able to find out, and they're also used for troubleshooting in that area. So the place where the turnaround time reports start, in a very unusual place, it's called in the work list format maintenance is where we design the turnaround time reports. So we looked at this program a while back when we were talking about designing work lists, but we can also, because the turnaround time report is also very much structured like most of the worksheets and load lists and other things that we talk about, we can also turn them around here, and we can look at those in this. Now, I'm sorry, the manual page for this is 8K, page 29. So is where we're looking. Now, the application has has 5 different work turnaround time reports that it can do. Now, they are limited to these 5. That's all that can be done. But if these reports are useful, then you can use them to use them. If not, then we have some SQL reports, which I think we've already put into place and are being used. But these are things that you can design and take a look at on your own. We can look at ordered to collected, which simply takes the date that the sample was ordered, the date and time the sample was ordered, and the time it was collected. Now, in a laboratory that really doesn't do collections, this is not a very useful time unless that you are accurately recording the time that the sample was collected. However, the ordered date and time is the date that the sample is put into CyberLab. So if you're putting in samples that were collected yesterday, this turnaround time would actually give you a negative number because they were ordered before, they were collected before they were ordered. Ordered to resulted has several different options, as we'll see when we get to the actual program, but they can be samples and they can be specific tests. Collected to resulted uses the collected to released is the collected information, and the released information, which is when they're actually released to the sample. Collected to resulted is again similar to the ordered to resulted, except it uses the collected date and time. And the last one is scheduled to collected, which is also useful in a place that does actual reports. So take a look at those things. Now, for each one of these things, and we'll just pick collected to released for the example, but they all work in pretty much the same way, and they all work in the same way that the worksheets work. You can have a title at the top of the report. Let me try another one. I'm trying to see which one I used. Not all there. I wonder why that is. So you can put in a title for headers and number of samples per page, and then on the next lines it talks about the different components that you may want on the report. Now, most of the time you may want just to see a sample ID or a test ID or something to that matter. And just because, let's just take a quick break, because I think I set something up in the test in the live environment. No, maybe not. Anyway, so you can put in whatever you have in the reports is what shows up in the reports. In most places, we'll just put in the sample ID, and if this is ordered to collected, you would say one column for the ordered date, one column for the collected date, and then you would have one column for the turnaround time, and that would be the the turnaround time in hours and minutes. And you can put in little headers and prefixes, field headings if you like, and you can put them in the line and the column. Works exactly the same as we did with our worksheet format maintenance. So whatever you put in there is what's required. So once we get these set up, then we go to the program, the actual program that runs the turnaround time report. And I am going to log off here because I want to go to the live environment. And because in the live environment I'll have better luck with actual data. Now the turnaround time report is actually going to be in laboratory management and in workflow reports, and it's called the turnaround time report. Each of the reports that are available, ordered to collected, collected to resulted, they'll have some different options. So ordered to collection, if I select ordered to resulted, you get some more options, because this one, because there's a result here, you can actually say it's test specific, and you can enter a test code. So if you simply wanted to see the turnaround time for a glucose or for a BUN or for some other test that you want to track, you would be able to enter a test code. And the ones that are released don't have that. That has to do with the sample. And the resulted one again has an option for a test code. You can look at scheduled to collected, which we don't look at. So let's take a look at one of the resulted ones and see if I have it. Now, if you run one of these reports and you don't get any data, then you've got to remember that you have to put something in that previous section in work list format maintenance to format the sheet before it actually runs. So the report options are detailed or summary. Detailed will give you a list of all the samples that are part of the report and the turnaround time for each sample. The summary really doesn't tell you much, but it will give you the average turnaround time for all the samples that were selected. So we'll look at detailed to see. I'm going to put the output to the screen. You can bracket it by sample ID, so that if you wanted to leave it particular, I think that all of your branches use a separate sample ID range, so you should be able to bracket it by your branch. Unfortunately, site code is not part of this program. The order date and the end order date, the start and the end order date. So you can specify we'll just use, see if I can get it to open up here. We'll go back 1 month to August, and we'll go August 1st to the present. And you can specify different days or times. So if you want to look at one day from just a particular period of time, you could actually do that. You have patient type filter, which means you can use all patient types. You have a sample type filter, so if you wanted to just look at just stats, for example, you would be able to you would enter a selected here and then just put an S in here. That would give you just the sample type stat. I'm going to do them all just to see. I don't know. Hopefully there's a report there. You can look for a particular doctor or client. So if you say a selected doctor, then it will ask you to put in a selected ordering doctor. If it's test specific, if you want to just look at the turnaround time for, say, a glycosylated hemoglobin or turnaround time for a hepatitis test, you would be able to select the test. I'm going to say no to that because I did not preload this as well. Now, this next, actually, one more thing I wanted to say. If you do a test specific, you can say turnaround time in so many hours and minutes. And what it's going to do, if I was to say I wanted to look at all the samples for that test that were over 2 hours and 0 minutes, I would be able to set in a turnaround time limit. So, and it's useful to see if what samples did not meet criteria. So if you have a criteria for a particular test to be completed within 2 hours, you could look at all the samples that didn't meet that criteria. And you can also focus on a particular technologist by putting in their tech ID to say, I just want to see what the turnaround time is for this guy for this particular tech ID. And once all of these variables and things are put in here, then we can run the test. Now, this could run for a few minutes. Actually, it didn't. So here's what we came up with, or what the report tells us about. It says for this sample ID was ordered on August 1st at 8:30. These 4 tests were ordered, and they had a turnaround time of about 3 minutes from the ordering time until they were resulted. And that probably reflects in your lab the fact that some of these tests are already running while the orders are being placed. So you're going to see that. Now, and we look at the next sample, shows a pap smear that was turnaround in 24 hours and 3 minutes and 24, so it's basically a day later. Now, you can also set these reports. If you look at in the manual on page 32, that's basically the report that you see there. And you'll notice those big numbers because those tests probably have never been resulted, or when they did get resulted, it was quite a while later. That's why I don't like to use the test environment for these reports, because they don't give us very realistic data. And you have to understand too that understand how your laboratory works. So if this ordered and resulted, these dimes don't help tell you what's going on, then maybe you would use a different report. And the reports can also include the date and time that the ordered date and time, so you can actually see what it is that they're looking at. So if we look at collected to resulted, now again, I don't know if any of these reports have been formatted. We'll just look at this again and see. Yeah. So these are collected to resulted tests, and this format doesn't have a sample ID on it. It just has a test code and a test name and department, turnaround time, and hours. And if we look at the formatting for this in the work list format maintenance program, I think we did order to resulted. We can see that it shows the header, sample ID, resulted, and the turnaround time, number of samples per page, and then etc. We can see that the sample ID is in line 1, column 1, and it looks like the order date and time is in line 1, column 15. The turnaround time in hours is in 70. The resulted date and time is in 1, column 1 and 40. I didn't see where the... That's quite interesting. Apparently, the department code is part of the program, because it isn't selectable. Interesting. You learn something new every day. Anyway, that's the turnaround time report. It's something that you can go in, you can take a look at, you can determine whether or not It's useful. You can play with it. You can't hurt anything by going in there and modifying the parameters of the report. If it is a report that somebody is using on a regular basis, you might put out an email, or better yet, go into the test environment and use the test environment for practicing, because this is a global program. So the settings that you make for the particular turnaround time with whatever components that are in the program are what are there for everybody. Now, we did make a couple of turnaround time reports for SQL reports at the request of some of the managers, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Any questions? Anybody have any questions about the turnaround time report or the other things that we talked about so far? So the next program is the patient entry log. The patient entry log is a log of everything that has been entered. Every time that you go into order entry, and I'm going to go back to the test environment. Every time that you go into order entry and process a patient or change something in a patient record, it is logged in the order entry log. This is a very valuable tool for troubleshooting problems or finding out what was going on, because it not only logs the fact that an order was placed and what tests on it were ordered and who the doctor was and all of those things, but it also logs who it was that did that, or who it was, which tech ID made the change. The manual page is in 8K, and it's page 15 is the patient entry log. Patient entry log is in laboratory management, in the system logs and reports, and it is the patient entry log. The patient entry log was originally designed to replace a manual log that was usually done in the laboratories before they had computers. It's not used routinely as much anymore. It's used more as a troubleshooting aid, as trying to follow up on what happened to a sample, who added a test. Was a test added, or was a test deleted? Was something changed? Was the doctor changed? Was the patient's age or sex changed? Anything on the sample that gets changed gets documented in the patient entry log. But in the original, what the option for normal print it was what we used to do when people wanted to, every day at the end of the day, they'd print out the log and then they would file it in a box, and maybe someday they'd look at it, but probably never. More often now it is a selected print, because we're looking for something specific. We're looking for some sort of thing. Now, if you use the normal print, what happens is that the normal print will print everything. It'll either print to the printer or to the screen, but it'll print everything that has been printed or that has been added since the last time the program was run. So, and then the next time you print it, it will print from that point forward everything that was changed, added, or changed in CyberLab. And that's the normal print. Now, there aren't a whole lot of options. I'm going to find out here in a minute. I don't believe it is site specific. Actually, I do think it is site specific. And so that if you print it from your site, you will get what was ordered at your site. Now watch the program make a liar out of me. Anyway, you can sort by date, you can sort by patient name, you can sort by client, or you can sort by sample ID. Now, since I'm going to print to the screen, I'm just going to leave the sample ID wide open, and we'll just be able to see what's in the report. What maybe we'll see if it doesn't take forever. Yeah. So we look at this thing and we see that this goes back a long way. Well, that's not too far. But sample number 987 was patient ID. Was patient ID 987. The patient's name was NY, age, account, and it was entered by JD. It was obtained on March 23rd. It was received on March 23rd. It was logged in on March 23rd. And these tests were ordered, the PP11, HABC1, and SED rate. Then we look and we see that it on the next line shows that we only see the PP11 and the SED rate. So what this tells us is that JD did the modification, and he took the HABC1 and deleted it from the sample. Now I don't have any idea. These are probably some old samples. This is the test environment, so we're not certain what all's in, what happened or what the reason was. Then it looks like that on another sample ID, 4321, we ordered a PP11 and an HABC1 on a different sample ID. Looks like the same patient name, looks like almost the same patient, but just a different sample ID and a different patient ID. But if we follow these things along, we can look at the samples. We can see that different kinds of things have happened. If you look at the example on page 44, it'll tell you some other things that'll happen to a sample. For example, the top of the page shows that a sample type was changed to stat, shows that the sample was deactivated. It'll also tell you if you change the doctor's name. It'll tell you if you change the location. Any of the information that's on this report, anything that goes on in the sample ID, like I said, is logged, and you'll be able to see what's happened to the report. So if you take a look at these things, you can take a look and see, watch what happens. If there's the same sample ID, you can find out if tests were added, if tests were deleted, but it tells you the state of the sample at that time. Okay. Now the next program I want to look at is the patient admit and discharge utilities. Let's make sure I got my. This is on 8K, page 13, and the patient admin, the usefulness of patient admin and discharge utilities is to, when you make a mistake, when a mistake is made, a sample is placed on the wrong patient ID, or a patient ID is entered incorrectly, or just totally wrong. And so what happens is that you need to go in and I guess the easiest way is to delete the sample and start all over again, or to delete the patient and start all over again. But you have to have a way to get rid of the patient. Otherwise, if you put in a patient that's wrong with the wrong patient ID, then it's still there, and somebody can go up and look up a patient by name and end up talking about and changing that. So in this program, there are a whole list of things that you can do. Now, you do not use the visit ID, so anything that talks about the visit ID, just ignore that. You also can ignore anything about discharging. It's not a good plan to discharge a patient. These programs have to do with patients who are on another system. They're getting admitted, like in a hospital. They have a hospital system. The hospital system admits them, and then they get discharged. Once they're discharged from CyberLab, you cannot use that patient ID again, and so you have a problem with that. If that's what you want to do, is to delete the patient ID, we would use the delete patient ID. So the only three options that you would use, or that you should use in here, are to change the patient ID of a sample, change the patient ID to another, and delete the patient ID. So the first thing we're going to talk about is change the patient ID of a sample. So what's happened in this instance is that you have put a sample, you've created a sample, you've ordered it, you may have even resulted the tests, and at some point you've discovered that the sample's on the wrong patient. And it might be, you might have put it on the wrong patient, ordered it on the wrong patient, and completely run it.
Sorry, Mr. Pratt.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Pratt, can I ask you questions?
Yes, please.
What's the difference between the changed visit patient's ID with the changed patient's ID?
Well, the visit ID is a third ID. It's actually a subset of the patient ID. And your facility doesn't use the visit ID. In the U.S., the hospitals, a patient ID identifies the physical body of a patient. It's a person. And the visit ID identifies that patient's visit to the hospital. So if they come in and they spend a week, or they come in and they spend a day, that constitutes a visit. And so we don't separate that. Now, if you were working with, if you had a hospital system, you may use that because it has to do with billing, it has to do with insurance and billing and all that stuff, because they want to say that. In an outpatient situation, a patient goes to visit the orthopedic surgeon, and then the next day they go visit the family practice or the regular doctor. Well, those are two separate visits for insurance billing purposes, and they would want to be able to separate that. The visit ID feature in CyberLab is a switch that we would have to turn on and turn off. So that's why I said you would not use those first two options. You would only use the visit ID. Okay? I'm sorry, only use the patient ID. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, what will be happen if, let's say, I choose the change visit ID instead of the change patient ID?
But nothing would happen because you don't have a visit ID. There wouldn't be a visit ID if I was to go in here and want to change the visit ID of a patient. See, it'll actually tells you can't choose that. You can't choose that program selection because the visit ID feature is not on. I would have liked very much if they would have just not made those menu options available, but like I've said a few times before, the programmers don't always listen to me.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we'll talk about change the patient ID of a sample. Let's make sure where I'm at. I'm going to exit out of here, I think. Oh, I'm in the test environment. Okay, I'm good. So let me go look for actually I do. So let's take a look at a sample ID. So I already wrong button. We're going to change the patient ID of a sample. So the situation here is that this sample was put onto the wrong patient. Now the first prompt you're going to get is, do you want changes to generate report activity? And what that means is that if the changes that you make here, do you want this report to reprint? Do you want it to print again? And if you say yes, then it will re-queue it to go through the report printing process. If you say no, then you're just changing it to document it. So I'm going to look at, I think this is a good sample. Sample number 68. Okay, where is it? All right, I'm going to have to find the sample. And go back to that other sample. 7777. There's a good one. So it's telling me that the sample ID for this patient is 7777, and we're going to change it to a different patient ID. So what happens is that this sample is connected in the computer to patient ID 7777, which is a valid patient ID. It's good. It's just that we put this sample ID on the wrong patient. So I'm going to make up a patient ID for this. We're going to say OK. So now all the demographic information and everything that belong to this sample, yeah, so it's telling you what it's doing. It's using the data from the old sample, and it's going to push it all over to the new sample. Now, if that sample ID had existed, then it would have actually brought that over. So that's the one sample. Now, the next scenario is to change one patient ID to another. Now, what happens with the one patient ID means that you either a couple of things could happen. You put in a patient ID that's incorrect and you want to correct it. Or what is more likely is you put in a temporary patient ID because you didn't know what the patient ID was or the IC number was, and you want to change it to its correct patient ID. So we're going to take a look and we're going to say, I'm going to use the same sample ID or the same patient ID that we do. And again, it's asking about report print activity. And so we're going to look at 7777 again. And it tells me that this is patient ID that. And so I'm going to change it to, let me see if I can find. And we can change it, and I'm going to change, this time I'm going to change it to an existing patient ID. See if I got one. Yeah. Now, what this program does, when I change one patient ID to another, that means is that all the samples that are associated with patient ID 7777 are now going to belong to patient ID ASP 652987. Okay? So that if I go in to inquiry, and once this is done, and it says ready to proceed, and it's giving you a chance to make sure you want to do this because this is a rather permanent change. Well, it's not permanent. You can come back and change it back again. Then if I go into inquiry and I look up patient ID 7777, I'm not going to find any samples because I have cleaned it out. Now, one of the things that we need to be careful about is when we do that, if the sample ID 7777 was in error or temporary, we need to delete it. And the reason we need to delete it is because when you go to inquiry and you look up a patient, come on. If I want to look up that patient, well, there's tons of them here. The patient is actually still going to be there. And it's going to be there with the 7777. You can see right here. It's still there. But the samples, there are no samples on that patient. So a person going into order entry can double-click on the patient ID field and find that patient and then start assigning samples to the wrong one. So if you change patient ID to another patient ID, and that patient ID that you changed from is in error or temporary, you need to follow it up with delete patient ID so that the patient ID 7777 is totally gone. Now, you cannot make a mistake here because first of all, you got to confirm the delete. We can confirm the delete. if you pick a sample ID that has samples on it, if I go ahead and find this, one of our patient IDs that we just created, and I try to delete it, it's going to tell me that it can't delete it because it has samples on it. So you first have to copy the samples over to change the patient ID before you can delete it. It's just kind of a protection mechanism that's built into the system. Any questions? Okay. The next program I want to look at, I've only got...
Sorry, Mr. Pan.
Sure.
Mr. Pan. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said just now if the 777 ID is in error, then you have to delete, right?
Yes, correct.
Then it will change to the ASP to the new ID. How if it's not error? Like, do we still need to delete the 777?
If you need to keep,
ID?
no, you don't have to delete it if you don't want to. If you want to leave it available for somebody else to use. But it's going to be the same patient demographic information as the new one that we changed it to ASB whatever.
Also means the old ID and the new ID will have the same demographic.
Well, wait a minute. That's not exactly true. If the ASP has already been, if it's already existing, so like I changed it to that, then I just took what I basically did was took all the samples from 7777 and moved them over to ASP 543987 or whatever that number was. 7777 still retains its demographic characteristics. So if those demographic characteristics are valid, then you don't want to delete it. You may want to use it. If they're not valid, then you should delete it. But most of the time when you change from one patient ID to another, it's because that the patient ID that was assigned was invalid or only temporary. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now, the next two programs that we're going to look at are programs that also use a log, and the logs that we keep, and also very useful in troubleshooting problems or troubleshooting incidents that might occur. The first one is the inquiry access log. Now, every time that we go into patient inquiry, we log our situation is logged. So when I go to patient inquiry and I look up a sample, come on, things are slow between us today. And I look up a sample, say, or even if I go in and look up a patient, ASP 543987. Oh, must have deleted that one. Okay. Well, that's going to make it interesting. Okay, I'll look up somebody. But if I go in and access it, a logging takes place, and the logging will tell us that I shouldn't have picked that one. that I looked at it, and if I print a sample, it's going to tell me that I printed the sample. And you'll see and the inquiry access log is on page 39, and then there is a sample of the log on page 40. So if I go into this sample, I'm just going to look at it. If I printed it, I would go into print. I'll print it to something that doesn't matter. So when we'll take a look at this log, 652,987. Then we'll show you how that works. So the log is located in, again, laboratory management. It's in system logs, and it's called the inquiry access log. So we can filter by patient ID or encounter, or patient ID and date, encounter, or just the user ID and date, or the user ID and the patient ID. Now, if these filters just show you how it is. An encounter is called a sample, is like a sample. So if basically you can read that as patient ID, comma, sample number. And that's how that, I'm not sure why they named it the way they did, but we'll just take a look at patient ID encounter. We'll put it to the screen. Now we can look at a series of patient IDs if we want, or we can look at a series of sample IDs if we want, but we're gonna just put the caps lock back on and try this again. Okay, it should have logged something. All right, hang on a minute. I think there's a dash. Yep, I forgot the dash. Okay, so here's the encounter. It's actually in reverse chronological order, so the most recent access was here. Now, it also tells us that this was merged from patient 7777, so that's other information that you can find out here, and that was the activity that was created this evening. These other ones were looked at on these date and times by these users, by me, it looks like, and above encounter was printed to the report. So it tells you that and the fact that it was force printed from inquiry. So that's basically the inquiry access log, and that's basically all that it's designed to do. It tells you who used it. It'll tell you what sample number. Now, and this is access history by patient ID, so there may be other sample IDs that we'll look at, and so it's right now filtering it by the different format. So if we look at, if we want to, we can go by encounter. Come on. Seems to not want to respond. Uh-oh. I'm wondering if I'm losing. Okay, okay, here we go. My connection doesn't seem to be quite as snappy today as it has been. Oh, there it goes. Okay, we're back. So if I want to just look at a particular sample ID, then I would select encounter. Okay. And I would select a sample. And then it's just going to give me the sample ID of that sample and show me basically the same information. Now, if we continue on in this manual, there are another on your system, in the PathLab Singapore system, there was a very, very large amount of data in these files. Now, these history logs, as we call them, access logs, demographic change logs, was a very, very large amount of data. And so what we did was, for dates after we went live with the new upgrade, everything is here in these files. For prior to the upgrade, back to the beginning of time, the history logs are stored in an SQL report. Now, the SQL reports are accessed from an icon on your Quick Launch icon selections. Now, this will take us out of CyberLab to the SQL server and allow us access to the SQL reports. So if your login has this icon, then you can get access to the SQL reports in this fashion. Now, you will see this report and you'll see these options here. Now, you may get, the first time that you try to access the SQL reports, you may get a message for a username and password, and I need you to write this down because the username and the password is going to be important. You should only have to use it one time. The first time your user goes in and uses this, and it should remember it. But the password is 4 query, the number 4, and QUER. No, I'm sorry. Oh, that is the password. But the username is report user. One big long word. REPORTUSER. And the password is the number 4 and query, QUERY, and an exclamation point. And then that should open up this screen here. Once this screen is open, you would select CyberLab Reports. And we're locked up again. Yeah, I'm not getting any response again, so the connection is being tardy. We can look at, if you want to look at what we see on page 42, the next page when it comes up is going to show us a list of all of the SQL reports that have been created for PathLab Singapore and are available to you. If you look at the one over there on the second row, all the way to the right, it says PLSG. What is it? 00005 access tracking prior to April, whatever the date is. I can't see that. That is the access tracking log for all the data prior to the update. And what you're going to see is you're going to select that, and then it's going to show you another screen that's also down below. I'm working from page. Matter of fact, let me get from page 42 of the manual, and it says to select the access tracking log report. And then you enter the patient ID, the starting patient ID, and the ending patient ID. And it will, here we go. Maybe it's going to show it work up now. All right, here we go. This is the PLK. Now, what I mentioned earlier that there were some other turnaround time reports, there are some turnaround, the TAT turnaround received to resulted, LIS 0022 is up there. That's another turnaround time report that we created for you, and then there are some other reports there. What we're talking about right here is the access tracking log. Prior to April of 2014, you would enter your a patient ID. Let me just and for the most part, if you're just looking for one patient ID, that's what's normally happens, is where you'd have to enter it again. and then you'd select View Report. And it's going to give you basically the same information that we saw on the applications report. We see the patient ID, we see the encounter ID or the sample ID, we see the user, and we see the date and time. If it was printed, we will see that it was force printed during that action or during that encounter. And so we see everything that happened to this patient ID. And those are the two reports that are available for that. I mean, whoa. I'm not sure what that noise was, but if it was as loud to you as it was to me. Does that mean I'm getting kicked out or what? Apparently not. All right, we have one more program, and this is called the demographic changes log. Now, the demographic changes log is very similar to the tracking log. The tracking log, I'm going to go back to the menu. The demographic changes log, every time that a patient's demographic information is changed, it is, hang on a minute. It is logged. So if somebody goes in and changes the doctor, they change their age, they change their sex, they change anything about the patient, it is logged into the demographic changes log. And again, this is very helpful for monitoring issues, for if there's a problem with a report or a problem, a patient's report comes out and their name is spelled wrong or something, and you want to find out if it was changed, you would come into the demographic changes log. Now, the demographic changes log, again, is based on patient ID or can be based on visit ID, which you don't have. Can be based on date or can be based on user ID. So if you want to look at changes that a particular user made, you would be able to start with that. We'll go ahead and print this to the screen, and we'll go ahead and look at the patient ID of one that we've been working with. And you can also look for changes in a particular date and time range. I think most of us will look at the whole range, but you can also set up the different time range. Now in this one, this is this particular patient. It says this is the patient limited information, and the change that was made was the admitting doctor. So we know that the admitting doctor was changed. It says before the change, the doctor was, the client number was 1828808. After the change, 123456787. And in this one also, another change was made, and these you can see that it was done basically at the same date and time. It was the attending doctor. Before the change, there was no attending doctor. After the change, the doctor was 123456788. At the same time, we also changed the name, and we changed it from Aspira Test Dragon. Now I've lost my connection. Can you guys still see it? Oh, I guess.
I see.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, okay. Miss Eva's here. Good. Oh, that's the problem. That's what that noise is. I don't have my computer plugged in. Did you guys hear that big loud clang? Wow. Okay, so I'm going to try and reconnect, but I'll talk about those changes that we were talking. It just any kind of change that's made with the in the demographic area gets logged with the date and the time and what it was before and what it was after. So That's kind of the demographic changes, and there's a good example of it in the manual. In this course, I'm sorry, I don't think I said this one is on page 35. Now, like the inquiry access log, all the data prior to April of 2014 was also placed in an SQL report. The SQL report for this is called the demographic changes prior to April of 2014. So if we look in here, and it's going to have the same basic format of the inquiry access log, and we'll go ahead and look at this same one that we were looking at before, 105.975 1Q and G 105.975 1Q. And let's view the report. And so it's going to show us nothing. That's interesting. It's supposed to have something. Okay. One Q 105.975 1Q. All right. Well, let's try. All right, something's not. All right, wait a minute. Let me use a different one. Yeah, some of these things, if they didn't have any changes after the upgrade, then or before the upgrade, then they're not going to be there. Two. All right, let me go back out and come in again because something's not. I was going to mention too that on the SQL reports, all of these reports that you'll see are in the live environment. They access the database from the live environment. The SQL reports can be done to the test environment, but they have to be set up for that, and that would be something that you would request from us to do. But we're just looking at data. There's nothing you can do in there that would cause any problems, but to look at the data. Let's see if this will help. So this is what I was telling you about. This is a message you may get if you access it for the first time, and it's already, the username is already there, so all you would have to do is to put in the 4QUERY exclamation point to get it to access, to get it to move on to the next screen. If you ever see any CYBLQ, those would be the test environment database. So, but there haven't been any created for that. Let's just see why we're not seeing any. I went through all this stuff and made sure that the programs that I used would be something in there, and so there must be either something wrong or okay, there we go. So we're going to see the same kind of information in this report as we saw in the demographic changes log in the application, but this is demographic information prior to April of 2014. So if you're looking up a patient that had activity prior to then, you would look up it here. If you had looking up a patient that had activity after they go live, then you would look it up in the application. And this was just basically because of the way the size of the files, and Mr. Tan wanted to put these in a different database, so we moved them and created this program for access. Again, it's your first line gives you the information, the date and the time the change was made, who the user was, the action U means that there was a change. Field ID is the admit doctor, so it was changed from 29-132 to 11-239. This one, there was an age change. There was a birth date change. So they apparently on this particular patient at this time in 2011, there was we had to make a number of changes to this patient. So we changed their name. Looks like the rest of the name was there. The field visit was changed from this to that, and so this is what this report will tell you. So if you get a report that prints out and it doesn't look like it's right, I know that you sometimes will take a requisition and compare it to the report, and if it doesn't match, then you can come into a program like this and to determine who the change was made. You can talk to them and find out why it is that they made that change. So that's really the last of the programs that that we had, that I had on schedule, working with Mr. Kwa, that we had to talk about. Miss Eva, if you're still there, would you either say hello or send me a chat? There's one other thing I wanted to talk to you specifically about. Okay. Well, I will work with. Oh, there you are. Good. Eva, there was a question to Lawrence that you sent about sending a result to the report using less than or greater than. And when we talked about the result response generator back in one of the classes that we had, that was the program that will be able to change a result. So if you need to report, for example, less than 0.5 for any result that's actually less than 0.5, that's going to take place in the result response generator. And you would set up a rule that says if the T4 is less than 0.5, then report an alpha result of less than 0.5, or you actually report a numeric result of less than 0.5, and then it will print out on the report with the less than or equal sign. If there's some other results that are coming in that are greater than that, then then we would deal with that. But you would need a rule for each test result that's going to be less than, and you'd need a rule for the greater than as well. So you'd need to create rules for those tests and those test codes. And then you could set those up. If you need help with result response generator, I can give you some things offline, because we did cover that in a previous class. They were, as a matter of fact, in this manual section, there's some notes that you had on page 24, 8K, page 24 is the one we covered that. I'll respond to your email and make sure that you understand what you need to do. I can also set up one of the rules for one of the tests if I get some information, and then you can use that as an example. So, if that's satisfactory, we can close off. If there's any other questions, are there any other programs, anything that we've talked about, anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? Speak now, or we'll have to take it up at another time with another session. But this concludes the 8 sessions that were planned, 6 of them with you folks and the 2 of them with Mr. Quah directly. And so I had a great time. First, let's see if there are any questions. Anybody has any other questions? Very quiet. All right.
Mr. Fan, can you send us the recorded training for this?
Send which now?
The recording?
The recording, as I mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Tan has the recordings, and if you get a hold of Mr. Tan, he should be able to supply those for you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and if there's any questions, send me an email, and I will remind him that you want them or whatever. But I have been making the recordings available to him through the Dropbox, and so he should have those.
Okay.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you very, very much, and enjoy your day, and we will all talk later.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pat. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.